about real war from somebody that's experienced it. And he's just going to drop you right into a battle. There's not going to be like a life context. It's just like right from the get start. So you might be a little lost in terms of like chronologically, you know, like where does this all fit? Don't worry about that. Just absorb as many details as you can about his story. And he's giving you a visual tool. Jack, did you tell me that you drew this when this was after the war, when you were bored in a college class?
Yeah, I did this in 1946. One day I was bored in class, I guess. And of course, we were only a month out of 45, 60 days out of action. And so those things were still part of me, and I was still...
Would you say that was kind of therapeutic to be able to
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting story. We'll get to this in about 10 or 15 minutes. So,
guys, I just want to say publicly, I really admire Mr. Moran. You're going to hear some things that are going to be admirable. Serving in World War II, of course, is things that we find admirable, but I find him just to be a really good human being and a good man. And so I'm grateful for you, Mr. Moran.
Oh, thank you.
And you've served this class a lot of years.
Oh, yes.
So he's been part of the World War II class. A lot of students have heard his story. So can we just say welcome and thank you for being here?
Thank you. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm not going to give you too much of what we did getting up to the point where we began fighting. I think World War II, I'm pretty sure it will be the last major down and dirty war where you're right down face to face with somebody who wants to kill you and you want to kill him. The next war will be fought with computers, drones, all that kind of stuff that they're coming up with nowadays. So we hope that war never comes, of course. We were brought to the eastern end of France, to the Sarre Valley. We were trucked over to that area, and late one evening, we started to go up through the woods to relieve the 26th Division. And they had ropes nailed to the trees so you didn't get lost. It was very, very dark. And at some point during that night, I and whoever was with me, it's always two to a foxhole. We came to the foxhole that we were going to be into, and we let the two 26th Division boys take off and go back and get some rest. And it was, we were apprehensive about what the next day was going to bring. We didn't have the faintest idea. I can't remember how scared we were, but it was cold and we were apprehensive. So as the dawn came the next morning, we could see that we were in farmland, just pasture land, probably dairy cows, things like that, and hedgerows, the old famous French hedgerows running down the side of each property to help keep the cattle in. So about 7 o'clock in the morning, the orders came down to get up and start advancing towards Germany. We couldn't see any, it wasn't like World War I where you go from trench to trench. This was getting out of foxholes, starting to advance. You couldn't see any enemy. We had no idea where the enemy was. So we weren't out of our foxhole 15 seconds, and we lost 7 men in the first 15 seconds. And 88 screamed in on my right and knocked down 3 guys. I don't know if it killed or wounded them. Machine guns opened up on our left, hitting some of our people. And when that 88 exploded over there, you can't go to them and try to help them because that particular point is already zeroed in by the 88. And if you go over there's going to be another 88 coming in right away to catch you. We scream for medics. Every time there's somebody down, we scream for the medics and hope that the medics are close enough behind us to come and help those people. The machine guns on my left opened up on us, and one of my friends, a very good friend of mine, was hit in the face. The German machine gun fires at the rate of 1,200 rounds a minute, which means every second 20 bullets are coming out the end of that barrel. And it's just amazing that Hugh was not hit in the spinal cord or in the brain, but his face was ripped off. I had no idea if Hugh was dead or just wounded, but we had to keep going. 70 years later, in one of the Division Bulletin magazines, here was an article about Hugh, and I was so glad to see it. He spent 4 years in a military hospital. He had 13 operations to put his face back together. I talked to Hugh on the phone not too long ago, and I said, Hugh, were you glad you got hit? You may have heard the expression, $1 million wound. That's getting hit someplace where it's not fatal, and you get taken back to a hospital to spend a few months, or taken back out of the war completely. And Hugh said yes, he was glad he got hit, and he felt that it was $1 million wound. And of course, I think the government must have spent at least $1 million putting his face back on. So that was, but I'm glad he survived, and he was happy. So the 88s were a nasty weapon. It was an 88 could dominate a battlefield. They were so accurate and so fast. They came screaming in. They just scared the daylights out of you when they came in. But if you heard the scream, you were safe, because the shell moved so fast that it was ahead of the speed of sound. The shell was back here and the sound was arriving here. So if you heard the scream, you knew that you were not going to get hit by that one. The one that is going to get you, you wouldn't hear. It hit you before, it would kill you before you even heard the scream. So anyway, we had to keep advancing. We could not stop. Anytime you heard anything up in front, like 88, you'd hit the ground and wait a few minutes, and then we'd get up and keep advancing and advancing. We want to keep pressure on the 88s to force them to move them. The 88s were big, very, very heavy, and the mount that they were on was very heavy. It took a day or two to move one, but we still had to keep putting pressure on them and force them to move those guns because they were doing so much damage to us. Every day we had casualties. The next day, one shell killed 2 of our men. One of them was hit in the back with a big piece of shrapnel, and one of them was hit in the groin, and it ripped open the arteries, and we couldn't stop the bleeding. We couldn't put a tourniquet on this guy. He was bleeding so bad. And as he was dying, he said, "I wish my brother was here to help me." His brother was a doctor in Chicago. But every hour, somebody was getting killed or wounded, and we were losing men very fast. It took us about 2 days of advancing through this farmland to get to the point where this picture will come into play. It was tough to get the wounded out because the Germans were shooting at the medics as well, but they had to get them out of there. The first night, we finally got over towards this town, and we sent men back to get some supplies, get some K-ration, get some more ammunition, more grenades, whatever we needed. And as they were moving back along where we had been active all day, they heard some moaning from a ditch. And they looked in the ditch, and here was a guy named Harold Mosier. He'd been wounded, but everybody thought he was dead, so nobody paid any attention to him. But he was still alive, so they were able to get Harold out of there and get him back to the aid station. We came finally to this little town called Obergehlbach. Is in the lower right-hand corner of that picture. It's right on the German border. And we came to a point right above the town. We didn't go into the town because the Germans were there, but we were on a elevated area above the town, and we dug in that area. And right across from us was a shallow valley, and then a high hill, which is that picture in that picture there, Hill 360. In military tactics, it's bad to have the enemy above you. And that was the case here. We were here on this hill. The Germans were above us, and they had Tiger tanks up on that hill. And the Tiger tank had an 88 mounted on it, and it was a deadly combination. It was the greatest tank in the world at that time. The 88 was the greatest piece of field artillery at that time, and we were outmatched. Our tanks could not compete with the German tanks. Our artillery was not, our field artillery that we brought out onto the field wasn't as good as our 88s. Our machine guns were not as good as theirs. The Germans were great engineers and built a great war machine, and this was evidence of it. So we dug in on this area below the big hill, and the Germans were looking down on us, And one German tank, one Tiger tank came out of the woods. There's some woods up there. Came out of the and was looking down on us and could easily pick us off. Just after we got dug in, there was some fellows that dug in right behind me, and the Tiger up there took a shot at us, and this shell could not have been more than this high when it went over my hole and slammed into the hole right behind me, killing 3 people. Carl Castle and a guy named McKinley. It was just horrible to see how badly these people were killed and bodily injured by these 88s. Now, when a Tiger appears like that, naturally we've got artillery spotters with us who see that, so they immediately call back and say, "Let's throw some 105s up there and get that tank." I was looking up towards the hill, and this Tiger tank, all of a sudden a 105 landed on that tank. And the 105 is a pretty good heavy piece of artillery, so it's a long shell. And I thought, gee, that's great, they knocked that tank out. Well, it didn't get knocked out, it just backed up into the woods. The Tiger tank was so ruggedly built. The cover plate in the front of the hood of that Tiger tank was steel that thick, 100 millimeters thick steel, and our artillery shells could not penetrate it. The only way you could knock out a Tiger tank was hit it from the side or from the back. At this point, this was our 3rd day. We had not seen a single German. That Tiger tank was the first sight of the enemy that we had. They were just deadly. We had to keep our heads down and hope that they didn't start shooting at us. So we spent that day on that slope outside of the town. The next day we moved into the town. The Germans had departed, and we had to start thinking about this Hill 360, which is that hill on the left side of that drawing there. Late one afternoon, the 4th day, we were ordered to attack Hill 360. So we had to cross a little stream to get to the point where we could go up the hill. So here in ice cold weather, we just had to walk through water with our leather boots on. We didn't have the snow packs. So we start up this hill, and it's covered with mines. There are many. My little drawing shows bodies laying there, but those are all just bodies. Those are not active soldiers, and there were many, many more. So as we're going up the hill, the Germans are dug in on the hill, and so we're using our rifles, and I saw Captain Jennings. We had a great captain, tough guy. I saw Captain Jennings running up the hill with his .45 in his hand, banging away at the Germans, and they were killing us too. There some of those bunch of there's 4 bodies at one point down below that I've marked off down there, and they were good friends of mine. And I got a letter from one of our people who wrote a letter to Tom Langston back in Pittsburgh, and he talks about these 4 guys. Here, Private Noble, he had a premonition that he's going to get killed. Swede Olson had a premonition also. He knew he was going to get it. And Franklin Canopy, who was a classmate of mine at Wisconsin a few months before this, he came over and tried to tell me something. He said he was going to get it. And all 3 of them got it that night, going up that hill. The tanks could not get at us because the tanks were up here and we were coming this way. Their artillery now could not get us, but they had plenty of mines. They had machine guns, mortars, hand grenades. We lost an awful lot of people up there. Now, I got to a rock pile up on top of the hill. That you'll see a rock pile up there and 3 tanks just to the left of it. I was in that rock pile with another sergeant. And the artillery was coming in. The 105s were coming in so close to us that this fellow who was in the hole with me started to bleed from his ears and his nose. He was fairly old compared to me. So he had to be taken out of there, and I was left alone. Now, over on your right, you'll see the name Bob Jacoby at the base of the shells coming in. Bob wasn't over there. Bob was with us. He was the artillery spotter who was directing, who would call back to artillery and tell them to adjust their firing, up or down, left or right, whatever is necessary. Bob was, Gail, what's the name of that town where the big fire was up north?
Santa Rosa.
Santa Rosa. Bob was, the Santa Rosa fire killed Bob 2 years ago. I was in quite in close communication with him, but he was evacuated 3 or 4 times, and his health was not great, and the bad air and all that brought pneumonia, and so Bob died. Interesting story. Valentine's Day, 1945. Bob was spotting, and the artillery spotter had to be up near the front. He had to be in the second story of a building so he could see how the shells were landing. And so Bob was in the second floor of this building, and at 88, they must have seen Bob, or reflection on his binocular or something. An 88 crashed into that room, exploded, and ripped out Bob's left kidney. So Bob is laying on the floor bleeding to death, and about 5 or 10 minutes later, the Germans attacked that building and drove our guys out of there, leaving Bob. They didn't have time and the ability to take Bob with them. So Bob's laying on the floor bleeding to death when the Germans entered the building. And the Germans come upstairs and they find Bob laying on the floor there. And Bob said, he said, I thought they'd just come over and pull out a Luger and put a bullet through my head and put me out of my misery. But one of the Germans was a medic, and he came over and bandaged Bob up, tightened, put a bandage around him, just try to stop the bleeding. And he said to Bob, he said, I hope that you're able to get decent medical care. Hope you can be saved. And about 30 minutes later, we re-attacked the building, drove the Germans out, and we were able to get Bob out of there and get him to a hospital. And he survived. And he had a great pension, didn't have to work. He's next 50, 60 years of his life, he didn't have to work. So that was great. Anyway, around 10 o'clock that night, we were relieved by another company, so we could get down off the hill and get some rest and get some decent food. And that was just great. But we did lose an awful lot of people up there. The next day, we went down back into the town and went into a barn. I've got pictures of us laying on the floor in these various barns. We only spent about 10% of our time in buildings. The other 90% was always out in the open, always out in Vauxhall someplace. So the next day, we were ordered to just go around this hill 360 and head up and try to capture a town called Walsheim, which was a mile and a half up the road. So we left this area and headed for Walsheim. We got up to Walsheim, and it was a little town where there was a village square, and all the houses were built around the village square. There was no suburbs, no town around it. And so we went into a building on the right side of this circle, and the house that we were in, when you enter the homes, you're entering on the main level, but the lots were all built on a hill so that the basement, the wall of the basement was above ground. And so I remember the very first day, a fellow, John Lee from New York, and I were down in the basement, just keeping an eye out the windows for the Germans, hoping that they wouldn't come. And an 88 exploded right outside the window, and it knocked John and I both on the floor. You can always, sometimes you don't get, the shrapnel doesn't get you, but you're in the explosive field, and it just slows you down. And I know John was furious. Because he had a sandwich in his hand, and the explosion ruined the sandwich. He was very unhappy about that. The first night we were there, it was my night to take out a patrol. And there's nothing more dangerous in the world than night patrol, leading a night patrol. because you're moving, trying to find the enemy. The objective is to not kill anybody, don't get into a fight, but try to capture a German if you can. Try to find out, sense where they are. Try to get an idea how many there are. Any information that could be sent back to intelligence. So I got very, very sick late that afternoon. I was just violently ill, and one of our sergeants, Johnny DeFlavio, said, "Jack, you're not fit to take out a patrol tonight. Obviously, I'll take your patrol tonight. You take my patrol tomorrow night." So that was just great with me. So I just laid down. We had a little pot-belly stove there, and I laid down around that stove trying to get well. So about 8 or 9 o'clock, Johnny and 4 guys took off on this patrol, trying to find the Germans. And as I said, it's so dangerous because you're making noise. You can't help but make some noise. And if the Germans are just being very quiet and just sitting there waiting for you, you're in trouble if they're going to get you, or they could. About 45 minutes after they left, they came running back into the house carrying Johnny. Johnny was all shot up. And I've thought to this day, what would happen if I had been leading that patrol? Would I have been in the same place? But anyway, that was, Johnny lived, he survived, he wasn't shot fatally, he was just badly wounded. While we're in that, the hill 360 that this drawing is, was on a mesa, and the mesa went back towards Walsheim a mile or two, and the German tanks were up on top of that mesa. We never did knock them out. And one day, we were, I'm trying to think of why the Germans started hitting us that day. Oh, here's what it was. A couple of the guys caught a chicken. It's unusual to find any farm animals because the Germans killed all of them for food, and the civilians also killed them all for food. But they caught a chicken, somehow gotten away. And they cleaned the chicken and put it in a pan and had a wood-burning stove in the kitchen. And so they cranked up, put in the wood, lit it, got it all fired up, put the pan in the oven. So we'd have chicken dinner. Anyway, the Germans, some of their tanks came back towards Walsheim, and they saw the smoke coming out of our chimney. So they knew that they want to do something about that. So this Tiger tank took a shot at us, at our building. The first shot ripped out the basement wall. The second 88 exploded in the basement, took out the kitchen floor and dropped our oven and our chicken dinner into the basement. And also, you know what an outhouse is? Some of you? Okay. They had an outhouse in the basement. It was an in-house outhouse. And of course, this shell ripped that thing all apart and added to the mess we were in. While all this is going on, there's a stairwell leading from the living room down to the basement. And when they built this, they had pulled a lot of rocks out of the farmland. Both sides of the stairwell, there were rocks cemented in. So it was pretty. So we all raced as these 88s started exploding. We all ran and sat down on these stairs. 8 or 10 of us, however many. And so we're sitting here while the shrapnel's flying around in the basement, the noise, the smoke, just anyway. Nice young guy, back from Mexico City, Juan Torres. In many of the German homes, we found preserves that the people put up, cherries, all kinds of things. He found a bottle, or not a bottle, but a jar of these cherries. And so he's sitting on the stairs, and he's got this in his hand. And while these shells are breaking, he dropped this, whether accidentally or intentionally, I don't know. He dropped this on the steel helmet of the guy sitting below him. So this guy's got red juice flowing down his arms, and he thinks he's been hit, and he's ready to kill one. We stayed there. The Germans were all around us at that town, and the next afternoon we got into quite a firefight with the Germans, and I still hadn't recovered, but it got so intense that I had to go up there and join the. But in fact, one of our BAR men killed 18 Germans that afternoon, early evening, and really. It was so sad to see our young people killed. It was so sad to see their young people killed. It just, it was senseless. War is senseless anyway. So we're up there up there fighting off the Germans, and after the Germans depart, about 10 o'clock that night, one of the lieutenants come up and says, "Fellas, head back into town. We're getting out of here." And what had happened, the Bulge had broken through in Belgium, and they needed us up in Belgium very badly. Now, General Bradley had a meeting with Montgomery, the English leader, and with Patton. And Bradley told these two generals, "We need help up there in Belgium right now." So Montgomery said, "Well, I'll be up. I can have all my men up there in 4 days." Well, Patton hated Montgomery with a passion, and Patton said, "I'll have my men up there in 2 days." And if Montgomery said I'll be up there tomorrow, Patton would have said, "I'll be up there this afternoon." Anyway, we were pulled out. We went back quite a ways, just hiked back to a point where we could light a fire finally. And there were trucks waiting for us there to take us up to Belgium. And these are open bed trucks. And here it is, 20, 25 above zero, and we're riding in open bed trucks. It took us 40 hours nonstop, well, practically nonstop, to get to Belgium. We were strafed once along the way. A German plane spotted us somehow and strafed us, and we all bailed out and ran into the woods. But nobody got killed in that. But we arrived in Belgium at late in the day, had a chance to get something to eat and a little bit of rest. And Christmas Day, I was sitting at my Christmas dinner on Christmas of 1944. I was sitting in the snowbank at 4 o'clock in the morning, sucking on a frozen turkey leg. That was my dinner. I don't know how I got that turkey leg, but I was happy to have it.
Did you ever see General Patton, like in real life?
Yes, oh sure. I'll have to tell you a story. Sitting in an open bed truck one day, heading to relieve some outfit, and I'm sitting here with my arm hanging over the side, and George pulls up right beside me, about from here to that door from me, and it's a narrow road, and the truck up in front of us has got the road slightly blocked, and you could hear some noise coming from that truck. He's got trouble. So George's driver hollered up there and said, "What's the matter up there? Let's get going." And the driver hollered back, "I can't move it. I'm going to burn out the clutch." And George hollered back, first time I heard him talk, he says, "Burn that son of a bitch out." The man had limited vocabulary, as you may have heard. He was salty.
Another question.
What was your scariest experience?
Beg pardon?
What was your scariest experience while on the battlefield?
Oh, one night in the Bulge, there was a big overcast. The Air Corps could not support us at all. No planes could take off. It was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And I was in a foxhole all by myself. Usually there's two people in a foxhole, but one with me had to go to try to help the wounded. And the snow was about that deep. And I could hear the crunching in the snow. And so I knew the Germans were within, from here to the wall from me. And I couldn't see them and they couldn't see me. So I debated, should I put the bayonet on the end of my rifle and just stick it in the ground and let it, in case they fall on it? Or should I start shooting at them, in which case I would give my position away? So I finally I took a hand grenade and I pulled the pin and I didn't throw it, because you can't throw a grenade at night, because you might, in the woods, you might hit a tree and it'll come back at you, see. Anyway, I just stuck my hand out, took my hand off it, and now it's red hot, and I pulled my head back into the foxhole. But that concussion of the blast hit the top of my helmet and knocked me silly for about a day. I was like having difficulty with my vision, and I had a concussion. But I got rid of the Germans anyway. That was the scariest. I was just being alone. It was very scary.
Jack, why don't you take us back to what you wanted to read?
Yeah. We talked about how horrible war is. This is Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy, a great Russian writer, 110 or 20, 30 years ago, wrote this. He was writing about a young man who had to go into the infantry. He goes to the place where men are killed and hopes it is only said that men are killed there. But that is not really the case, and things will turn out otherwise. But half an hour into the line, and like at 15 minutes, is ample to show that the reality is more terrible and more unbearable than he expected. You are expendable. Don't imagine that your family's good opinion of you will cut any ice here. You are just another body to be used. Since all can't be damaged or destroyed as they are fed into the machinery, some may survive, but that's not my fault. Most will be chewed up, and you'll probably be one of them. This is regrettable, but nothing can be done about it. That just triggered another thought on my part. Well, anyway, war is, how we suffered, you'll never know. We can't tell you. We were cold all the time. All we had on was our clothes. We had no sleeping bags, no bedrolls, no blanket, nothing. Just all we had was our clothes on. We were hungry all the time. We were tired all the time. We were scared all the time. I can't understand how we took it, how we put up with it. But somehow we did.
Jack, can I ask a question? This is something that they often ask me, but I'd rather you answer it because you know and I don't. You talked about the German having compassion and helping your comrade when he had the kidney injury. Did you guys as American soldiers hate Germans, or did you have compassion? How did you face, how did you think of the Germans?
I personally, I would not shoot a German in the back. I would not kill an unarmed German. But every war in the history of mankind has had killers in it. We had killers in our group too. They would take a German, be out behind the building and beat his head in with a rifle, but horrible things. And the thing that scared me most was we ended up down in Czechoslovakia May 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th night. The war was over that week. And so we lit a big bonfire. We're sitting around this bonfire and we were talking about what we're going to do when we get back home. And two of the fellows who were killers said they're going to go home and get on the police force. I just, that's sad, but that was the case. The Germans, towards the end of the war, we were fighting kids, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. And we tried not to shoot them. We tried to get them to surrender, which we were fairly successful at that. But they were scraping the bottom of the barrel, using old people who were very young people. And they had no possibility of, no hope of winning at all, of course.
Does anybody have a question? We're getting close on time, so this will be your time. I would encourage you to take an opportunity. Again, Taylor.
What was your view on the Germans? Like, how did you see them? Did you see them as good people? Did you see them as just the enemy?
Well, I personally did not hate them. When we entered training, we were given a book, a little booklet, and the title of it was The Psychology of Hate. The psychologists were trying to get us to hate the Germans, but they were just as, I saw pictures of young German boys crying, because of the pressure, because they hated where they were and what was happening to them. It's just terrible. There are 1.5 million Germans buried in Belgium right now. There are no Americans buried in Germany. Many of these Germans, they put 6 Germans into a grave. I don't know if they just threw them in, or I don't think they put them in caskets because you can't. You'd be digging it pretty deep. But many of these were not identified, didn't have dog tags, and people back home wondered forever whatever happened to my father or my brother or my husband. But it was a horrible thing for Germany to start the war, and suffering was so great all over. I stay in touch with, up till recently, I stayed in touch with 5 of my friends who were in this war with me. In fact, on that hill, Wayne Harbaugh, Texan, who died about 6 months ago, on the way up, Wayne had killed, or he shot a German. He thought he'd gotten him. And Wayne turned his back to start shooting at some Germans over here. And this German had a weapon, had a pistol or a rifle, and he aimed it at Wayne's back as Wayne turned. And a kid named Jack Queeg, who was a great soldier, Jack saw this happening, and Jack turned around and killed the German.
Hey Jack, we probably need to wrap up. Is there any final words of wisdom you can give to these young people?
We just have to keep praying that our leaders are good, sensible people who avoid conflicts that we've seen in the past. You kids don't deserve that. You deserve peace and the ability to build your future. And that's difficult to do in a serious war. So we can't have that anymore. We must pray for peace and guidance.
Guys, can we say thank you to Mr. Moran for being here? Jack, we need to take a class shot with you. So everybody, we're going to smile nicely. On 3. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you, fellas.